Hey guys, so today what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the programming of the Sol-Ark 12K, and I'm also going to show you how I changed the way this was interconnected as well. What I had done originally was kept the grid tie solar completely separate. It is a fairly large array. It's a 10.9 kilowatt solar edge array, so a 10 kW solar edge inverter. And I originally decided to keep it separate, but decided that I could probably AC couple it and it would be fine. So I've done that, and I'll show you what that is and what that means. So a quick overview of the AC coupled adjustment here. That used to be my breaker for my solar edge inverter. It's now the breaker for the Sol-Ark inverter. And that ties directly to the grid before the main breaker. So this is a separate main breaker. Then in the top I had the solar edge. That was the output of the solar edge. So what I did was I moved that over to the bottom here, and then I have my battery feed breaker up here at the top. I did also order an interlock, so that'll be here in a couple days. That'll prevent me from blowing anything else up. So the way this works is the battery feed feeds this panel and this one over here, but it also wakes up the solar edge inverter when the grid's down or when the grid's up. It still wakes it up, and then the solar edge inverter feeds power to the loads, and the excess power goes back to the Sol-Ark and gets either charges the battery when we're off grid, or it just goes right back to the grid through the Sol-Ark when the grid's up. Alrighty, so this is the screen. We got 4 buttons: up, down, escape, enter. It is touchscreen, so I'll show you what's going on here right now. We have solar, so that's the DC coupled solar. We have grid, which I have on right now, but I'm not feeding or using anything from it. We have power to the loads, and then power from the battery. So right now the way I'm doing it is I have my AC coupled solar tied into the load center that is feeding the loads. So this isn't necessarily accurate. This is just seeing what's going out of the batteries. If you click on the little battery there, it'll go in depth on what's actually happening here. So I have 142 watts coming from the solar. The grid is 0. Inverter is doing 580 watts. UPSLD, I'm not quite sure what that stands for. Uninterruptible power supply, but I think that just goes into the legs. 120, 590 watt, 120 volt, 470. So yeah, that's which leg is doing what, and then what's coming from the battery or going into the battery, and then some temperatures. I haven't hooked up the temp sensor on the battery yet, but I'm going to do that just for monitoring purposes. So then getting out of that screen, what else can we hit? Oh, we can hit grid, and that's system power per month. This is not very helpful on here. It's a lot better to look at it online. And then solar power month, so that's the DC coupled again. So I've been doing about 11.5 kilowatt hours a day, which is awesome considering I have a 2.6 kW north facing array. Alright, so setup. First things first, basic setup. Time, or so display. I've left the beep on. If there are any alerts or anything, it'll start beeping. Time. So advanced, I have Sol-Ark fault on. You can do generator peak shaving or grid peak shaving. I did try the grid peak shaving. It did work really well. Limited power pulled from the grid to 1,000 watts and supplemented all the rest with battery power. And then this next one here is for the home limit sensors. So I have CTs in the main panel, and you put those on, and then you hit this and hit OK, and it alternates which leg it's selling on, so it can figure out where the CTs are and which direction they're facing, so it doesn't actually matter which way you put them. So let's see, Factory reset, we're not going to do that. You can lock out all changes if you want. You can do a system self-check, factory reset, test mode. And then the next menu is paralleling. I've done one installation where I paralleled them, and you just hit parallel, you make one the master, one the slave. I think one gets Modbus 01 and one is 02. And just leave them on the same phase. If you're paralleling 3 of them and doing a 3-phase setup, you would select which phase is which here. All right, battery setup. So first menu, battery. You put in the specs for the battery. So I have about a 500 amp hour battery, maximum amp charge. I can actually bump that up. Put that up to its maximum. I had it down lower because I was testing something. Then max amp discharge 185, so that's the max that this inverter can do, continuous. Then TempCo is temperature compensation. That should be at 0 for lithium batteries, and then adjusted. If you have lead acid batteries, you adjust it accordingly. So then over here you have battery, use battery V charged or use battery percentage charged, and so that will either show that's it. Okay, if I do battery V charged, it will show the voltage on screen, and if I do battery percentage charged, it will show the percentage. The cool part about this is that it's got built-in shunts, so it knows how much power is going in and out of the battery, and so it can do pretty accurate state of charge measurements. I know at least one of my friends had an issue with the Sunny Island inverters and using an external shunt, and he was having trouble getting that to accurately display the state of charge. So I'll go back into the menu here, battery charged. And then if you're not using a battery, you would just hit no battery. That would be like for an installation where you planned on getting one. You could still run this thing without a battery, but it's an expensive grid tie inverter if you're doing that. And then it can use, I believe it's RS485 or CAN bus to connect to a battery BMS. So you'd click that if you're using a BMS, and then activate battery. Obviously, we have a battery. So on to the next one. I have a herd of elephants living above me apparently. So charge. Right now I have float set at 62.7. I have a 16S lithium NMC battery. Absorption is 63. I would like to go a little bit higher with this, but can't right now, so we're going to leave it at 63. My battery will go up to 67 volts. I'd like to have it at 64, but 63 is just fine. I lose a little bit of power, but I don't stress the battery when I'm doing it. And then equalization, I just don't have it set to anything. I just have it set to 0 hours here. So then the way I have it now is I have grid charge unchecked and gen charge unchecked. You can check those, and it will pull power from the grid to charge the battery when you want it to. The reason I have this unchecked right now is I'm doing a self-consumption mode. So what I'm doing is using power from my batteries at night and charging them during the day with my grid tie system. And so the way this works is any power feeding back into here from the load center will charge the battery first, and then once the battery's charged, it will then go to the grid. So you could also do gen charge. That's for the generator. If you are auto starting a generator, you got to have that enabled, and that will charge and auto start a generator, and it will start it at a certain percentage. The one thing they don't have available right now, but they've told me it's going to be in the next week or so, is that you'll be able to stop the generator at a certain state of charge as well, using the time of use settings. Okay, so we've gone over all those. Discharge. So I have it set to shut down at 5%, low battery alarm at 10%, and restart at 25%. So if it shuts down, it will stay, the charge controllers will stay alive and we'll recharge the battery probably in the morning. And once it gets to 25%, everything turns back on. And then battery V empty, mine is technically 48. I've set it at 49. I don't really want to ever go down that low. So battery efficiency, we're at 99% for the lithium NMC. And battery resistance, that was kind of a wild guess at 6 ohms. I got to dig into that a little bit more. I know the calculations for using them with Simplifies, but I was kind of unsure of what to put it at for my specific batteries here. So I'm going to give Sol-Ark a call and see exactly what I should be doing there. Then we get to the Smart Load tab. So this is a cool one. What this does here, right now I have 4 AC coupled input checked and 61.5 hertz. So right now what it will do is when it's operating without grid power, it will at 90% state of charge. So once the battery gets down from 100 to 90%, it will drop the frequency to 60 hertz and allow the grid tie inverter to turn on. And once it gets up to 98%, it will then switch it to 61.5 hertz and shut off the grid tie inverter. So the other thing you can do with this menu is if you don't have an AC coupled input, you can use gen input as load output, and then you can hook up to the generator breaker, and you can set it to turn the breaker on, smart load on battery, so you can turn it on. So say you want to run a like an electric water heater or something as a diversion load, you can set it to come on at 90% and then shut off at 80%. And so what it will do, or whatever percentage you want really, so what it'll do is as soon as it gets up to a certain percent charge, instead of ramping back the charge controller and losing that power that you would otherwise be generating, you can have it go into a water heater or some other load that will use power. You can't use that when AC coupling is enabled though. So there are a couple of things like that in this setup where it doesn't quite make sense the way they do it, but that's the way they do it. So let's see, solar power, I don't have access to that menu, so that means, well, if I have used gen input as load output, then I do have access to that menu, which we're not gonna do that. So smart load, and then it also has a wind turbine menu here. You do have to use a controller, but you can input the controller output into one of the PV inputs, and then you can set the voltages and the amperages and everything here. So very cool. I haven't tried this on any installations yet, nor do I know how well it works, but it is a cool feature on here. All right, grid setup menu. So first one is limiter. So I have grid cell enabled, and what that will do is that will sell any excess power coming from my solar, either the AC coupled or the DC coupled. It'll sell up to 9,000 watts, which with my 10.9 kW array, I really never see over like 8,000. Occasionally I'll get a cloud edge and it'll go up above that, but not typically. So then you can limit power to home. So I have the home CT monitors on here, and it will actually limit the power from the DC coupled solar to match your home loads. Oh, there goes the fan. Limited power to load. It will do that to the load, not just the home. So that's if you're using a protected loads panel and not and running a main panel as well. That's when that would be different. And then time of use setup. So that's this menu over here. So the way I have it set up right now is for self-consumption. I'm not interested in using this at different times of day. I could if that became a thing here in Vermont, but it's not right now. So I have it just set to 25%. So it'll go down to 25%. But what this will do here is I don't have grid charge enabled or gen charge enabled. So it will not pull power from the grid to charge the batteries. It will only charge the batteries off the DC or the AC coupled solar, which is pretty cool. That I can rely on that to, not pull power from the grid. That was kind of one of my things to do with this one, is to be more self-sufficient, but I'm also testing the capacity of my battery and seeing, if I can actually go off grid. My goal in the future is to go completely off grid, more for fun than anything else. But I want to see if I can do that, and this allows me to, try it without actually shutting off grid power. So if it does pull too much, it'll just go back to grid. Next, cell control. So I have it UL 1741SA. I have that checked. Grid reconnect time 15 seconds. I think that's technically supposed to be like 300 seconds, but I got tired of waiting. Power factor 1. Gen connected to grid input. So if you're using a generator, an auto start generator, or manual for that matter, and you are AC coupling, you cannot connect the generator to the generator input breaker. You have to connect it to the grid breaker and use a transfer switch between the two. It's a little bit of a funky way of doing it. Again, I'm not sure why they do that, but it has something to do with the settings, and I guess, you don't want the generator running when the AC coupled solar is running, because you'll have issues if the generator is good. So, and then zero export power, I have that at 15 watts. Basically that kind of limits the export power, and everything's a little bit inaccurate. I mean, within like 10 watts, which is no big deal. I have it set at 15 just so it doesn't export power at night. I have it set at 15. So, gen connected to grid input. The other way you could get around this issue is if you're willing to play with the settings and you have a manual start generator. You can attach it to the generator breaker and just leave it off, and then go into the settings, battery setup, smart load, uncheck AC coupled, and then you can hook up your generator and everything will work perfectly. Some of the installations I do, the customer doesn't necessarily want to do that. They just want something that will work and they don't have to mess with the settings on. So for some of my installations, I've actually done a transfer switch on the grid input. All right, so this is the grid input parameters: 60 hertz, 120, 240. You can do 120 single phase, and you can also do 120, 208 three phase. For the three phase, I believe you do need 3 inverters, which gets expensive, but cool. Grid high voltage, 265, low voltage. You can adjust all these. These parameters, you may adjust a little bit more, the frequency, if you're using a generator on the grid input and your generator is a little bit out of whack. I have seen it reject a generator before, even when these settings were widened. It didn't like it. The total harmonic distortion, THD, was too far out of whack. Granted, it was a pretty terrible generator, but it does help to have a good generator. And then we have freak volt, frequency and voltage. These ones I haven't played with, nor have I played with the power factor menu, nor have I needed to. The one installation I did using, it was using microinverters on an AC coupled. They did have me enable QV and FW, and didn't really tell me why. So I'm going to leave that one alone. And then relay 1 is enabled. That's the generator. I don't know if they have 8 relays on here, but they only used the 1 for now. So I think that was it for the grid setup menu. I've been playing around with, you know, the time of use settings. You can have it, you know, you can almost have this thing discharge, well, you can have it discharge battery power to the grid when there's no sun out. You can just discharge it, but I don't want to do that because the power company might get a little bit annoyed. So then, yeah, I've been playing around with this. You know, you can have it set at like, so at like 1300 hours, you can have it go to 25%, and the rest of the time you can have it stay at 100%. So you can have it discharge at a certain time, or at you know 1600 4 p.m. You could have it discharge 6,000 watts up to 6,000 watts, limited power to load, so it will only discharge to your loads. It won't discharge to the grid. If you don't hit limited power to load or limited power to home, it will discharge that full 6,000 watts to the grid, which some of you might want, others might not. And then the last thing here, system alarms. I did have an overload fault. I was running 2 heat pumps, a couple other things, and my electric dryer, which is about 5,500 watts in itself. And I think the dryer kicking on just dumped it. But I'm going to go into some tests, not right now because my wife is sleeping, but later on what this thing can do. And so that's it. Down here it just shows the COM version and the MCU version. Sol-Ark can update these remotely, and I do have them update mine, or I will have them update mine. It's good to stay up to date on the latest versions. I have had them call me and tell me that they wanted to update a customer's system, and to, you know, ask the customer if it's okay, because they will lose power for about 2 minutes. So it's pretty cool. When they have a new update, they will let you know and ask you if it's okay if they update it for you, knowing that you will lose power for a couple minutes. All right, guys, I know this was a little bit of a dry video, but if you were with me to the end on it, it probably means you have a Sol-Ark 12K. So thanks for watching. I would highly recommend reading through the manual and reading through it multiple times. There's a lot of really good info in here, and there's stuff that I missed, you know, first or even second time I went through it. So definitely look through that, read it, embrace it. It's a good thing. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll get working on the next one. Also, guys, if you have any like specific questions about a specific menu in there, or want me to go in depth on any part of it, I know I kind of breezed through it, but if you want me to, I know there's at least one of you that does. Just let me know in the comments, and I'll try to do something specific for you. All right, again, thanks for watching.